Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the opportunity to add my voice to this debate. 2 years ago, Canadians elected our government with clear instructions, namely to create jobs and growth, keep taxes low, and return this country to budget balance.
Tough decisions. I am very pleased to say that we have made the right choices for Canadian workers, businesses, families, and communities. The results of these choices are clear. Debt is low, deficits are falling. En effet, en mettant en œuvre une...
Indeed, by implementing our economic action plan, Canada has one of the best economic records amongst G7 countries, and this held true during the recession and during the time the economy started growing again.
Depuis le pire de la...
Since the worst of the world recession in July of 2009, Canada has created over 1 million new jobs, including 90% of full-time jobs and 85% in the private sector.
Growth in the third quarter is in the 9th consecutive positive quarter, another sign that our economy is on track, on the right track. Le taux de chômage...
The unemployment rate of this country is at its lowest level in 4 years, and it is lower than that of the United States, something which has not happened in over 30 years.
The World Economic Forum has ranked Canada's banking system the soundest in the world. And le fardeau d'impôt fédéral...
And the federal tax burden is at its lowest in 50 years.
We have positive results. We've achieved positive results for Canadians, but we are under no illusions that our work is finished. The global economy remains fragile, and with growth in advanced economies somewhat slower than expected. In addition to the threats to the Canadian economy that lie beyond our borders and beyond our shores, I'm concerned with the potential threats to the Canadian economy from within our own nation, such as the threats from the leader of the NDP. As if imposing a $20 billion carbon tax wasn't enough, the leader of the NDP has another multi-billion-dollar tax hike he wants to impose on Canadians. He just recently reaffirmed his plan to take billions of dollars each and every year out of the pockets of Canadian entrepreneurs and businesses to fund big, bloated government schemes. This NDP tax hike would target job creators, especially small and medium-sized companies, the engine of economic growth. And with a nearly 50% increase in their tax bill, it would be devastating, particularly at a time of economic uncertainty globally. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know better. That's why Canada's Economic Action Plan actively pursues new trade and investment opportunities, particularly in large, dynamic, and fast-growing economies. Indeed, notre gouvernement a récemment conclu...
Our government recently signed an agreement in principle on the comprehensive trade agreement with the European Union, and that agreement will bring to the Canadian economy the equivalent of 90,000 new jobs.
Dans le plan
Mr. Speaker, Canada's Economic Action Plan for 2013 is focused on positive initiatives which are designed to create jobs, promote economic growth, while at the same time returning us to a balanced budget before 2015.
The great recent recession, our government took the necessary steps to safeguard our economy, our families, and jobs. Indeed, we responded quickly and effectively in January 29 with Canada's Economic Action Plan, and it included investments in infrastructure and tax relief for Canadian families. It was instrumental in getting Canadians back to work. At the same time, we kept government expenditure under control.
But contrary to the previous Liberal governments, to balance the budget, we did not reduce, nor will we reduce, transfers to Canadian families or to other levels of government.
Possibly the most important factor We all remember the mid-90s when a previous Liberal government reduced the deficit, yes, but they did it on the backs of healthcare and education for our children. Mr. Speaker, instead of our Conservative government taking that approach, we have set clear targets to bring down the deficit and return to a balanced budget by 2015. Our government will also not engage in risky spending schemes. Notre gouvernement ne veut pas engager.
Our government doesn't want to get involved in risky expenditures. It won't impose a $21 billion carbon tax, nor will it increase the tax burden for corporations.
Return to balanced budgets is indeed working. Just as our government tackles debt, we are also tackling expenditures. We're reducing the size and cost of government to ensure that taxpayers get value for their money. Il faut que nous trouvions.
We must find value for all of our expenditures when using taxpayers' money.
In addition, we are trying to target, and doing so very effectively, a lot of tax loopholes, addressing aggressive tax planning, clarifying tax rules, combating international tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance, and improving fairness. And when we ensure that everyone pays their fair share, it keeps taxes low for all Canadian families and businesses, and thereby improves the incentive to actually work, save, and invest in our Canada. Overall measures taken by our government since Budget 2010 will result in an ongoing saving of roughly $14 billion, and our government will go further enshrining in law its successful and prudent approach to balanced budget legislation. The same as Canadian families know that they cannot prosper by continually spending money that they do not earn. This is how we are managing the Government of Canada. And Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government believes not only in keeping families strong, but keeping people employed. And that's why Bill C-4 will deliver a 3-year freeze on employment insurance premiums, delivering tax relief for small business owners and the workers that they employ. And I have a number of citations from people like the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business who have applauded these efforts and say this is exactly what is required by the Canadian economy. Indeed, Diane Brisebois, the president and CEO of the Retail Council of Canada, commented exactly the same way. In fact, I want to share the one EI rates. This is Dan Kelly, president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. EI rate freeze is fantastic news for Canada's entrepreneurs and for their employees. This move will keep hundreds of millions of dollars in the pockets of employers and employees, which can only be a positive move for the Canadian economy. I could go on with a number of these, Mr. Speaker, but the freeze will help to attract foreign investment in Canada. It will help create jobs for Canadians and will foster long-term economic growth, c'est-à-dire la création d'emplois.
Job creation, economic growth, and long-term prosperity for all Canadians.
Speaker, unlike the opposition, our government understands that tax relief is important to all Canadians. I encourage all members of the opposition parties to vote in favor of this important measure, Bill C-4, which will leave more money in the hands of the average Canadian. Bien sûr, il y a...
Now, of course, there are many good measures that we have adopted and that will create jobs, will lead to economic growth and long-term prosperity for Canada. But unfortunately, I don't have time to mention everything here today. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for New Westminster, Coquitlam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I listened to my honourable colleague with interest, and I just want to clarify or ask certainly one question, but first of all, let me mention this is an omnibus budget bill, which has so much in it that one questions the democracy of this approach. But the member mentioned deficits and the government's low taxation plan, the low deficit plan. I have to point out that this government is responsible for the largest deficit in Canadian history. But my question, because she also talked about the private sector job creation or job growth, my specific question to the member is if she could tell me how the government has created these jobs and what sector these jobs are in.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South Centre. Order.
Thank you very much, Monsieur le Président, and I thank my honourable colleague for the question. There are 2 points to this query that I would like to address. First of all, the much maligned omnibus bill. My husband and I have always run our family's budget as an omnibus bill. If we don't have money left over at the end of the year, we know we have failed. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be as responsible as the average Canadian is with their finances. Regarding the deficit reduction, I have some very specific facts, and I just would like to remind the honourable member that his party maligned the Conservative government of Canada when, at the very start of their tenure in government, before the economic crisis, I might add, Mr. Speaker, we paid down $37 billion of debt. That gave us the flexibility to respond to what was required when the crisis hit, and it made us the most successful country in the G7. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Okanagan-Coquihalla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I, too, was quite interested in the member's speech. I certainly appreciate her enunciating some of the principles that are in the Economic Action Plan for this year. Mr. Speaker, it seems that the opposition, regardless of what's in a particular budget, they're either going to say the government isn't doing enough, or they're going, in this case, we have an opposition that says the government is trying to do too much. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, we live in a much different world. We had the financial crisis and the subsequent Great Recession, the largest recession we've seen in North American history since the Great Depression. And I hope members would appreciate that this member is trying to bring out some of the points that are important to help bring us forward. And so I'd like to have this member just enunciate some of the policies that she particularly is in support of in this bill that matters to her riding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South Centre.
Well, I thank the honourable parliamentary secretary for that question. And, you know, certainly in my riding, I know I share this with a lot of my colleagues, but the backbone of Winnipeg South Centre, is all of the wonderful families in the area. And many of those families are running small and medium-sized businesses, which are the backbone of job creation for our Canada. And I'm so very, very pleased that we not only are in the process of creating jobs, but we're in the process with this bill, C-4, of ensuring that those small business entrepreneurs, whether they own a phenomenal Italian grocery store or a Subway, they have reduced with this proposal their costs of EI, and more importantly, or equally importantly, the workers at all of their stores and all of their enterprises pay less for the next 3 years. We are ensuring that there will be stability. We are ensuring that there will be the ability for families to spend money on other things too. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.